Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of, so here's the deal. Just straight up front, just to be fully transparent with you guys, this podcast, I don't want to say it's having an identity crisis, but I'm sort of toying with the idea of changing up the name. I've been thinking about it for a while, so just right off the bat, welcome back to ? Because just to give you guys a little bit of insight into what I've been thinking about. This podcast has been called Marvel Mania, but I've recently gotten to thinking, maybe I don't want to necessarily box myself into Marvel. I mean, I love Marvel. You know that. If you've been watching the channel, I love Marvel. But, I don't know. I've just been toying with the idea, maybe changing it back to the original idea of Access Blockbusters Pod, ABP. Not entirely sure as of yet. We'll kind of see. I guess by the time that you listen to this and you see what the title ended up being, maybe I made a decision. Maybe I'm just still toying with possibilities. So this might not be an episode of Marvel Mania. This might be an episode of Access Blockbusters Pod, or just question mark. Not entirely sure. But regardless of what the title of this episode is going to be and the title of this podcast is episode 3 is going to be about WandaVision. As I've been teasing on my channel for quite some time now. I apologize. Again, I just have to be upfront with you guys that I know this is late. I know that if I wanted to be fully relevant and capitalize on the buzz of WandaVision, I would have done this 2 weeks ago. Just the truth of the matter is, to give you guys a little bit of behind the curtains, behind the scenes, time hasn't been on my side. It's been a pretty hectic, busy past 6 months to a year. For me personally, and so I've been trying to make videos when I can. If you've been able to notice, the mic quality kind of changes between certain videos. I've been using different mics for different videos. Different videos have been pre-recorded at different times. So again, I just want to thank you guys for understanding all of that sort of stuff, because I'm trying to do these kinds of things when I can. I love making these podcast episodes, but it does take, it takes an hour, obviously, hour plus 2 hours to record. But I do enjoy it. I do really enjoy it. And so, I had the chance to do it now. And I think better late than never, because I really do want to talk about WandaVision if anyone's still interested. So, there's that. And also, I did post a video on the channel a while ago asking for questions. And so if you guys, some of you guys did post a lot of questions, and I really do appreciate that. And we will be answering all of those questions, reviews, comments, concerns, all those sorts of thoughts about WandaVision later on in the episode. So stay tuned for that. If you submitted a question, if there ever is going to be another, if there's going to be an episode of this podcast soon, I will be either posting another YouTube video asking for questions, or maybe at the end of this video, or somewhere you'll see that I'm asking for questions for that episode, whether it's Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or the Bad Batch, or Black Widow, or whatever it happens to be. So stay tuned for that if you want to have your questions read out and answered on the podcast episode, which I will be doing later on. So that's just some housekeeping stuff. That's just some stuff that I wanted to take care of up top, but let's get into the content. So, before we get into WandaVision, your questions, my thoughts on the show, and all that sort of stuff, I did want to talk about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I am recording this, just, pretty shortly after the first episode. Since we're on the topic of Marvel, I did my spoiler review. It's up on the channel now. If you want to check out some more sort of in-depth thoughts on the Falcon and the Winter Soldier and the first episode. But I did want to take a little bit of time to just talk about it and sort of share my overall thoughts for the series. Look, I've been somebody who's been saying for quite a while, long before WandaVision ever came out, that WandaVision was going to be something special. And I think, whether or not you like the finale, or whether or not you liked all the fan theories being busted and all that sort of stuff is it's up to you, and that's your expectation for what the show was going to be. But I think we can all agree that this show at least tried something so creative and so different. And that's what I was really looking forward to. I've been comparing it to Thor Ragnarok, because before Thor Ragnarok came out, I was saying to everybody who would listen to me that this is going to be something special, just because it's different. And just because it's creative and it looks like it's heading in a good direction. I felt the same way about WandaVision. And it turns out that, at least for me, it really did work. Now, Falcon and the Winter Soldier is a different story, because this is quintessential Marvel, as people have been saying. Can't disagree with that. Although, again, what I was telling someone the other day after seeing the first episode is that what I do really like, though, is that this feels like, it still feels quintessential Marvel, but it also feels like they're growing up a little bit, if that makes sense. They're maturing in that they're really taking time to develop their characters more. I think all the backstory, and again, this is going to have some spoilers for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, so if you haven't seen that, the first episode, then come back to the podcast or skip ahead. I believe there will be time codes in the description down below for when I'm going to start talking about WandaVision, so if you haven't seen it, then head down there. But I really do like the development that they're giving Bucky and Sam, because quite honestly, I've never been the biggest Winter Soldier fan. Not the movie. I do like the movie quite a bit. The character. And Anthony Mackie's Falcon, Sam Wilson, has always kind of been not a non-character, but just somebody who is there, who is cool, has some cool wings, but doesn't add a ton to the scene. It's cool to have the Falcon there, and on your left, obviously, in Endgame. But, I'm just glad that they're able to take these series and really delve into the characters. Obviously, episode 1, like I said in my review, is a lot of setup, and I think that's primarily because, with WandaVision, they were able to go episodic, episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and really, dig into each episode because it's a different decade of the sitcoms. I think it really shows for Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I'm sure for Loki, that they are really meant to be like full-length movies, 6-hour movies, or 4 to 6 hour movies or whatever. And they just got chopped up into 6 parts. And I think that that's okay, right? I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier will benefit from a holistic watch from beginning to end, all 6 hours of it, or however long it ends up being, because I think that there is going to be a really, really constant through line. Unlike WandaVision, where you could probably pop on any episode, and obviously there are, plot elements of the overarching story, but it's going to be fun, it's going to make sense in its own way. And I think that's really cool. I think that, again, Marvel just, Disney Marvel, using the medium that they have available to them to explore all of these different characters, different subplots. I'm super excited to see, again, and also like WandaVision, which had all these sorts of different plot elements coming together that I really liked, with Hayward, Monica Rambeau, Jimmy Darcy, obviously Wanda, Agatha Harkness, Pietro, White Vision even at the end. I think that Falcon and Winter Soldier is also setting up a lot of really interesting plot threads that may really come into play later. So, we have the Flag Smashers. I think they're going to be an interesting group to follow. We have, obviously, Bucky and Sam, respectively. Bucky trying to make amends. I think that's really cool. Sam with his fishing, his loan problems and things like that. Then we have, of course, Wyatt Russell playing John Walker, allegedly U.S. agent. We're not entirely sure. I'm still not entirely sure if they're going to call him U.S. agent or just Captain America. They did say, Captain America, but we'll see. There's also the possibility of Isaiah Bradley coming in. That's exciting. And then, of course, Zemo and Sharon Carter. So there are, a lot of different things to be excited for. Again, it's not... I really enjoyed WandaVision because of the mystery aspect of it. I love mysteries. Knives Out was one of my favorite movies of 2019. I love Sherlock. I love the books of Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie and all those sorts of things. So I love the mystery. Falcon and the Winter Soldier doesn't seem like it has mystery per se, but it has intrigue. And I think that that's what Loki's going to have as well. It's going to have intrigue. Shows like Miss Marvel and She-Hulk, I feel like are going to be more sitcoms. And those are fun in their own right if they can pull it off. And I think that they are going to be really fun. More just, like actual sitcoms or reality shows or whatever, like a procedural. And I think that these shows, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, and WandaVision that they're starting out with, all have this element of intrigue and mystery to them. And I really like that. So, just to sum up, I really did have a good time with the first episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Again, on its own, I don't think it's necessarily the strongest episode, but it doesn't have to be because it's setting up a lot of great things to come. And I also don't think it's really fair to judge this episode on its own because, again, it feels like part 1 of 6 of something bigger. I just recently watched the Snyder Cut. The review is also on my channel. I'm not going to talk about the Snyder Cut that much because I made a 20-something minute video about that. And there's not much else that I want to add there, except to say that, I sort of understand now why Zack Snyder decided to just drop all of the Snyder Cut at once. I do think that it could have been cut up into some parts, but I also think that watching it, if they released it in 6 parts, it would have felt very odd because the first part is mostly exposition, mostly backstory. The second part is just setting up, finishing out Act 1. Act 2 is part 3 and 4. Act 3 is part 5 and 6. So it makes sense. I think it makes sense. Again, I don't think, Marvel is releasing the Falcon and Winter Soldier in 6 parts, and I think it's going to work. It's going to work out fine. We just kind of have to be patient with the setups that they are leading us to. But just those are my quick thoughts on the Falcon and Winter Soldier. Let's move on to the meat of the episode. Let's move on to WandaVision. All right, so how this is going to go is, first of all, again, if you submitted a question, thank you so much. I will be answering those towards the end of the podcast episode. So again, stay tuned throughout the whole thing to hear your questions answered and discussed. Thank you guys so much for doing that. I could talk by myself about my own thoughts about WandaVision and all that sort of stuff ad nauseum. I could do that for 6 hours if you really wanted me to. I don't think anybody wants me to. So, I really appreciate the interaction between you guys. It's what makes this channel so much fun for me, is being able to hear your guys' thoughts on every single video, what you liked about, the content we're talking about, what you didn't like, what you liked about the video, what you didn't like about the video. And this Q&A, I called it Marvel Mailbag, and I still might keep that, but we'll see. But the Q&A part is really my chance to just interact with you guys on a deeper level, other than just answering your comments through the text. But yeah, I'm gonna spend a lot of time at the beginning just talking about my thoughts, and then we'll be diving into your questions as well. So let's talk about WandaVision as a whole. And the first thing that I want to talk about is expectations. And I think this is a big topic, and I wanted to get this out of the way, not out of the way, but I wanted to address this up front because, look, expectations played a big deal. Let's not lie, right? All of us, myself included, expectations played a big part in how we enjoyed the show, and then maybe how we didn't end up enjoying the show at the end. You can go back and watch all 8 episodes of my WandaVision breakdowns, starting with 1 and 2 and ending with 9, and then also just the other videos that I was making about WandaVision. Look, it's no secret that I kind of bought into the whole, there's this big cameo. What if it's Reed Richards? What if, it's Doctor Strange or Hank Pym? I bought into that as well, because it's fun, right? It's fun to think about, what Marvel is capable of doing and what the possibilities of them doing. Certain things like bringing in a big cameo, Al Pacino as Mephisto and all that sort of stuff. I get that because I myself, was a big part of that as well. At the same time, and I talk about it in the Snyder Cut review, I talk about it in various other videos, is that there's also the sense of, I feel like in order to really appreciate something for what it is, we have to sometimes just, and not even sometimes, I think most of the time, just set our expectations at the door, whether positive or negative, because, we have our own expectations of what something should or shouldn't be, and can and can't be. For example, I thought the Snyder Cut was going to be a disaster. Not a disaster, but just not something that I liked. Turns out I really liked it. And hey, that's not me saying that I apologize for my expectations, because I had my expectations. I thought it was going to be a bloated mess. But you leave those at the door and you go in and you enjoy what there is to offer. And I think it can go the other way too. I think we all expected WandaVision to really have this big something, this big it factor, whether it was actual multiverse Pietro. We'll talk about Pietro though. It's a little bit of a different thing, in my eyes. But, again, I think that at the end of the day, and I said this in my review of episode 9, is that this show did not need a Stephen Strange for 5 seconds to be a good show. That doesn't make your show good. The fact that, let's just say at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home, or Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield show up. Because it's one thing if they're an integral part of the story, and then, we can talk about actually relevance to the story if Doctor Strange was an integral part of this story. But if they show up for 10 seconds, it's not going to make or break what that movie is, because, it's kind of, I don't want to say ignorant, but it's almost shallow of us to think that a 10-second appearance by somebody else is going to save a show called WandaVision. It's going to save a movie called Spider-Man No Way Home. I think that, look, if Reed Richards or Ian McKellen, Magneto, or Patrick Stewart, Professor X showed up, I would have, of course, lost my mind. I think what we all sort of gravitated towards for The Mandalorian is, yes, Luke Skywalker showed up at the end, but to me, that didn't make or break that episode. I think it only enhanced what was already there. If Luke Skywalker did not show up, obviously to me the episode would not have been as good, sure. But it's not like it changed the integrity of what that episode was. And also, again, Luke Skywalker was a plot point they had been building up for the entirety of its run, right? Like the Jedi, well, not the entirety, but the latter half. The Jedi was coming, and the speculation of who the Jedi was. If they didn't deliver on that, then that was a little different. This show never promised us Doctor Strange. This show never promised us the aerospace engineer. Now, to, I guess, our credit, I hate to say our credit because, who are we? But I guess to our credit, Paul Bettany and Teyonah Parris have a little bit of a bone to pick with you guys because, okay, Teyonah Parris, I'm so excited for you guys to meet the aerospace engineer. Maybe there is somebody, I've heard rumors from, the writers and the directors saying they don't want to talk about because, there's whatever. Okay, fine. Maybe the aerospace engineer is Reed Richards and they show up in Captain Marvel 2 or Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, whatever. Teyonah Parris, that you probably should not have gone out and said, I can't wait for you guys to meet them, because that's just fuel to a fire that you do not want to light. Paul Bettany, I get Paul Bettany's a little bit more. He's just trying to be funny. He's been in Marvel since the beginning, since 2008, and he knows what the MCU is. So, you know what? At the end of the day, he's being funny. He's being a troll. I'll take that for what it is. But I think that, so, in our defense for sort of having some expectations, because I never bought into expectations of a cameo based on the show itself. I didn't. I bought into the expectations of the cameo actually primarily because of what the actors said outside of the show, and unfortunately they just ended up being wrong or trolling us or doing whatever. But at the end of the day, look, this show didn't need a big cameo. It didn't, and we'll talk about why. But it didn't, in my eyes. And if the reason that you're disappointed with the show is because the finale didn't have Doctor Strange, then I think it's important to just reevaluate what you value in these kinds of pieces of entertainment. Do you value the big pop moment, or do you value what the story is in itself? And to go off of that, I think one of the things that surprised me about WandaVision, at the end of the day, when I finished watching episode 9, I felt, I was like, oh, this is a strange feeling. Because the last piece of Marvel content, I recently rewatched the film, by the way. I adore it. I know some of you guys don't, but I adore Spider-Man Far From Home so much. I love that movie. And I'm going to be addressing it, in comparison to WandaVision in just a second. But, at the end of WandaVision, I felt sort of strange. I was like, oh, this is an odd feeling for a Marvel property, show or movie. And I couldn't quite place what it was. And so I kind of thought about, okay, how did I feel at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, the last piece of MCU content? And I realized that what Spider-Man Far From Home did, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm not, but what Spider-Man Far From Home did is it told its complete story, but it also wanted to set up the next film, right? Which is why you had that tag at the end, which is, Peter Parker's identity being revealed, and all that sort of stuff, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's totally fine because, there are sequels, right, that are going to happen. And it's just trying to get us excited for what's coming up next. And it works, right? We're really excited to see what happens next with Peter Parker in Spider-Man No Way Home. WandaVision didn't need that, though. And I realized the difference here is that WandaVision from episode 1 to episode 9 told a complete story. Not that Spider-Man Far From Home or, let's say Captain America the First Avenger with a cliffhanger at the end, they didn't tell the complete story. They did. But they also wanted to set up things for the future. Surprisingly, and I think to the disappointment of many, WandaVision didn't really set up a lot of things. Wanda didn't break the multiverse open. Did not obviously set up mutants. Wanda didn't lead into Spider-Man No Way Home in a tangible way. And I think that is something that it's different, right? But I think it's okay because I realized, Endgame obviously had an ending, but it also was the continuation and the ending of what came before, 2021 previous films. WandaVision was just one standalone film that told its story from beginning to end, and I realized the MCU really hasn't done that. And I actually really like that. I found that sense of closure, a one-off film that tells its story and is done. Not even a film, a show. It tells its story, it's done, is refreshing. It really is refreshing to me. So those are just, a couple of things that I wanted to address about sort of expectations and the way we view the show, because I think a lot of people who don't like the show, and again, if you legitimately didn't like the show, that's totally fine. But I think a lot of people who didn't like the show also are looking at it in sort of a narrow-minded way. And I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but I also think that there's something to be gained about opening up your perspective and trying to see the show for what it's trying to be, not what you want it to be. So there's that. But let's also talk about Wanda and Vision, because this show is called WandaVision. And, there are a few things that I don't like about this show. There are a lot of things that sort of bother me. But what this show needed, and this is an absolute must for the show, needed to work, were obviously Wanda and Vision. And not only did they work, but they were a strength of the show. They were quite literally, I think, the best parts of the show. Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany. Look, I think it's too early to say do they deserve Emmys and all that sort of stuff, but they, at least in comparison to the rest of the MCU, those two, I think, gave some of the best performances out of anybody in the MCU, period. In any film. And I think that that's saying a lot. I think that we've obviously had some brilliant performances in the MCU. Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, all that sort of stuff. Tom Holland. But this show was really riding on these characters more than any other property, and they delivered. Their chemistry was impeccable. Their comedic timing. Paul Bettany was allowed to be really, really funny. Obviously, as the Vision, he's not always allowed to have a personality because he's the Vision. He was allowed to be really funny, and then when they needed to be heartfelt, they were heartfelt. I'm not going to go, on an episode-by-episode sort of thing, like breaking out every single scene and every single moment, but just to point out a few things, what Vision's confusion throughout the show, I think, really, really shine through, of like Paul Bettany trying to slowly figure out who he is. And by the way, I love at the end how Vision is sort of like, I'm a memory, a body with no form. That entire scene, by the way, just broke me. It was crazy how good that was. And also episode 8. Say what you will about the finale, but I think that, when I go and rewatch this whole thing, straight through, I think what really is going to overshadow the little nitpicks and things that I have about the last couple episodes, or even the last episode, I love episode 8, is the emotion. I think episode 8 and 9 are really just going to break me, whenever I rewatch this show. But Wanda and Vision needed to work, and they did. They absolutely did. And so, speaking of characters, though, we'll talk about the villains, the quote-unquote villains, Pietro and then Agatha Harkness, later on. But I think that, speaking of characters, I want to talk about other characters in the show, and let's talk about the twins. I think that the twins are interesting because, look, at the end of the day, the twins were okay. And whether or not that's disappointing to me is a question that I'm still kind of thinking about. Because if the twins come back, and I think that they are going to come back, in some capacity, because Young Avengers and all that sort of stuff, right? It's pretty clear. Am I super attached to them? No. At the same time, they had to act in the sitcom sort of style. That's fine, whatever. It's just, I'm a little bit ambivalent towards the twins at this point. That's a little disappointing, because if they are going to be a big part of the MCU moving forward, Wiccan and Speed, I want them to be something more. And that being said, though, they filled their role. It's still unclear, I think, and I think this will be explained later on, of who exactly they are. manifest it. Thank you for choosing me to be your mother. I think that's a really interesting way of putting that. So again, I put the twins on the list because I think that they're obviously a very important part of the series. But I also am just not entirely sure how to feel about them. Let me know what you guys thought about them on the YouTube comments down below. But again, I just, in thinking about if I'd be excited to see them as part of the Young Avengers, I'm not entirely sure as of yet. That being said, they filled their role, and that was that. But let's move on to Monica Rambeau and Sword. I think Sword in itself is a character. We'll talk about Hayward in just a second. We will talk about Hayward. Here's the deal. Monica Rambeau, Teyonah Parris, is a good actress. Absolutely. Interestingly enough, though, as this show went on, episode by episode, I found myself disliking Monica more and more and more. Liking her less more and more and more as the show went on. To by the time we got to episode 9, I don't want to say I dislike the character. I don't, because nothing has really screamed dislike. I just think that something about the way that they set up the character of Monica Rambeau, and the way that she acts, because again, I think Teyonah Parris is a great actress, and I think that the character of Monica Rambeau is super, super rich. I just think that something about the way that they set her up is, again, she had some really awesome moments, right? When she was sort of getting her powers and all that sort of stuff. It didn't feel like it belonged in this show, though. That part of the show felt a lot like setup. And, for all of the talk of, hey, look, WandaVision is here to tell its story, Monica Rambeau almost felt like the odd woman out, so to speak. And at the end, I sort of went, what are her powers exactly? Like, seeing the world differently, and then her body kind of phases through. Again, comics, you can tell me all you want about the comics, and that's totally fine. I know what she is in the comics, photon spectrum, all that sort of stuff. The movies are not going to adapt the comics page by page, line by line. So I'm sort of curious to see what Nia DaCosta adapts and takes from WandaVision and adapts into Captain Marvel 2. Because again, I understand they cut a big action sequence with her and Pietro or Ralph or whatever and the twins in episode 9. I just it's something to where, not that I'm not excited to see her again, but I think I just need her in a different context other than WandaVision, if that makes sense. However, Jimmy and Darcy. Now, look, if you've been watching my rewatch Infinity Saga reviews, you know that I actually have always been somebody who said I don't mind Darcy at all in Thor and Thor: The Dark World. I really don't. Can I sort of understand the hate behind the character? Yeah, maybe. Even then, that's kind of a stretch for me. But I do understand that she can be annoying to some. I've never felt that way, and so when she came back, look, I'm totally fine with that. I was totally cool with that. Did she steal the show at all? No, I don't think so. To me, she was good in her scenes and all that sort of stuff, and she ran over Hayward with a funnel cake truck, and that was, satisfying, I guess. But look, she was there. I think what I was thinking about is it's more of the novelty of the fact that we're getting an old character coming back. I think that's a lot of what it was to me. Jimmy, it was mostly the same. Although I do love Randall Park as Jimmy Woo. Some of his lines were very stilted, I think, and maybe not the best written, but I also think the character is sort of meant to be goofy and cheesy in that sort of way. And so I really dug that. And again, it's just the novelty of seeing characters plucked from Thor and Thor: The Dark World and Ant-Man and the Wasp and then Captain Marvel and all just sort of being plucked together and put in the show. I think that's what what the appeal of that was. But speaking of characters, let's talk about Hayward and Sword. Look, I was convinced that Hayward was a Skrull, an evil Skrull, and I still think he might be, by the way. I'm not ready to let that theory die because I think that is just such a good setup to Secret Invasion. And we'll talk about mutants in just a second and why I never really bought into the idea of mutants being in the show, ever. Especially with Evan Peters, Pietro. But Secret Invasion is something that they were going to do. Whether it was going to be Captain Marvel 2 or whether it was going to be its own show, which it is, they were going to do Secret Invasion. And to have the leader of Sword, director of Sword, be a bad Skrull, I think has really big implications for the MCU moving forward. And in Secret Invasion, obviously, with Nick Fury calling up Monica Rambeau and all that sort of stuff. So I think that he was, again, I didn't believe he was Mephisto or anything like that. I never bought into those theories. He's a jerk, obviously. Was it a little anticlimactic that he just gets arrested at the end? Yeah, I think so, because he was such a big focal point throughout the series. And just to see him put in handcuffs at the end, and it's like, oh, bye Hayward, I'm not sure that his journey in the MCU is done. I don't think so. And again, if he's not a Skrull, that's fine, because that's just my expectations and all that sort of stuff. But I also think that whatever he is, if he is just the director of S.W.O.R.D, that ending to his character was anticlimactic, I will admit. I would have loved to just have a little bit more of Hayward getting his just desserts and all that sort of stuff. But perhaps that's just me. Now, one of the things, aside from the characters, that I loved about the show the most is the mystery. Like I've said before, I love mysteries. And I think that what works really well in its favor is the fact that they are slowly peeling back layers, slowly, each episode, and then bam, they give you episode 4, and bam, they give you episode 8. And I think that that's good. There are some shows that can pull off just the slow burn. I think WandaVision could have, but I also think that it was really cool to get episode 4 and episode 8, pulling back those layers, but also to do it in the pretense of the sitcoms was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I think that, as somebody who really, I think what this show did was appeal to so many people, in that the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, other than really young kids, this show appealed to almost every generation. And, they getting to watch their spoof of the Dick Van Dyke Show, or Bewitched, or for me, The Office, Modern Family, Parks and Rec, the speaking to the camera style, the mockumentary. It was great. And that's obviously what makes this show so good, is obviously the sitcoms, and also just the production design, the special effects, the score, like everything came together. And if you watch the Assembled, by the way, on Disney Plus, the little documentary detailing how they made WandaVision, it's really quite interesting, because they put so much care and effort into just making this show as authentic to the time period as they possibly could have. And I give them massive kudos for that, because it's something that I think they could have just as easily been like, 50s, it's cute, we'll spoof it, Weird Al Yankovic style. But it shows that they really didn't want to do parody. They wanted to sort of honor the original sitcoms and make them in that style. And I think that really shows the love and the care that they brought in the Lopez's to do this, the theme songs for all of the sitcom episodes. Those were great. The theme songs, by the way, are some of my favorite parts of WandaVision. Even just painting Vision blue in the black and white, just to make sure he kind of looks reddish in the black and white episodes. I mean, just that kind of detail that they could have just easily we'll CGI it out. We'll make him sort of look reddish, whatever. But they really went for it. Christoph Beck, I believe, is the composer. He did such a phenomenal job with the score, I think. I believe he did Ant-Man, and, other than the theme song, which I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think was Michael Giacchino actually who did the theme song, and he just did the rest of the score. I could be wrong. Nothing to write home about, but I think that he did such a commendable job with this score that I was just floored. I was blown away. I think Wanda's theme, the thing that plays over the end credits that infuriated us, because please stand by. That's going to be a meme, I feel like, for a while. Is just commendable. People don't talk about music. People don't talk about production design, special effects, all that sort of stuff. Visual effects, yes, some of it at the end was a little bit CGI-y, and all. They talk about how they really had to do it at home during the pandemic. I get that. But at the end of the day, look, what really sets the show apart is the amount of love that was put in by everybody, by Elizabeth Olsen, by Paul Bettany, by the production team, by the directors, by the writers, just the love and care. And speaking to that, the writing. I mean, the writing in some of these episodes, what is love, or what is grief if not love persevering? We'll say hello again. I was body without form, and now, I'm a memory. Such beautiful writing that shows they understand these characters. And that's all that I can ask about the show. That's all I can ask about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, is that they understand Sam and Bucky and Loki and Clint and, and Jennifer Walters and all that sort of stuff. And so I really do think that, look, at the end of the day, that's really what made this show special, is the fact that they cared so much about it. And I think that that's something that we really need to just, when we take a step back and look at a show like WandaVision, that's something that we really need to take stock of and just appreciate for what it was. Okay, but, there are other things, there are a couple big elephants in the room that we need to talk about to end out my sort of thoughts on WandaVision. So let's talk about Ralph. And let's talk about Pietro. Here's the thing. Okay. You guys know, you can watch when he showed up in episode 5, I believe, at the end of episode 5 when he shows up. I said, right there, it's documented, this is not Quicksilver. And there are some logistical reasons as to why. First of all, WandaVision got sent into production, I think, right around the time that Disney bought Fox. So the timeline of production doesn't really line up. Add on to that the fact that Kevin Feige plans, he says, at least 5 years in advance. And it shows, by the way, if you've been paying attention, that's absolutely correct. He said he had planned 5 years in advance. Disney bought Fox in 2018, I believe. Guess when the Fantastic Four movie is sort of going to come out? Maybe 2023 or 2024, 5 years later. The Endgame reference. Anyways, 5 years later. And that's not, it lines up. Feige is not just going to panic and have Evan Peters just, be the Quicksilver from the multiverse. Now, he can retcon this. Absolutely, he can retcon this. I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying on the base level, I knew this was not Quicksilver. From the Fox universe. Now, why they cast Evan Peters is interesting. I think that that's something that Feige went, because I think that that's something that would have happened after Disney bought Fox. And I think that Feige kind of went, okay, we could get any actor to do this. We could maybe even get Aaron Taylor Johnson to do this, although they talked about how they wanted to be shocking that it was someone different. Why not get Evan Peters is sort of what I think that they were thinking, although I can't speak for them, obviously. And again, if the Fantastic Four show up in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, guess what? That's 5 years after Marvel bought Fox. Feige has his plan. At this point, he has planned for 2026. I even think he says 27 or 28 or something like that, 29 even. He knows what he's going to do for the next decade even, generally. And look, I think that we just have to keep that in mind, that with mutants and all that sort of stuff is great, but they're not coming for another 3 years and 2 years, and that's fine. That's totally fine. Anyways, all that aside, I, along with basically all of you, am disappointed with the way that they treated Evan Peters' Quicksilver. Not Quicksilver, Pietro, Ralph. They could have had him be, let's just say Agatha Harkness's son. They could have had him be the bunny, Senor Scratchy. That would have been more satisfying to me if he just turned out to be the bunny. Because honestly, they had been setting up Ralph this whole time. They had been setting up the bunny as this sort of weird puppet. And obviously, Matt Shakman talked about how the bunny was supposed to be a demon and the deleted scene, all that sort of stuff. So I, like you guys, am disappointed. And we have some questions, I believe, about Quicksilver and what I think about, what Marvel's going to do with Quicksilver. So I'll save those for later. Point being, though, I was disappointed with Ralph, not because of the Fox stuff. Because, again, it's important to keep in mind, those were our own expectations. Feige has been telegraphing to us, we're not getting mutants for another 2 years at least. And we have to keep him at his word, because he has not broken his promises. He rarely, if ever, deviates from plan. Only for good reasons. The Inhuman situation, back when they were going to make the Inhumans, was a whole big deal between him and Ike Perlmutter. Spider-Man obviously is a thing that he can't pass up in Civil War. Like, Sony wants to make a deal with him. That's something you change your plans for. I think mutants, some people might say, well, then why don't you change your plans for mutants? Because I think that that's so massive of a thing to introduce that you can't just, like, change your entire plans, you know, to basically retcon everything that you've been setting up. And I really do think the only reason that Spider-Man came in at the last second was because he did still fit in with the plans that Feige had. I feel like the mutants they're too big of an entity, you know, if that makes sense. But let's talk about the real villain of the show, though, because we'll get back to Quicksilver in a question later on. Agatha Harkness. I'm sorry, Catherine Hahn. I loved you in Parks and Rec. You're great. But Agatha Harkness falls squarely in the C tier for me of villains for Marvel. Great actress, great performance in some parts. In some parts, a little bit over the top, but that is what it is. Terrible villain. And where else have I said this before about a villain in a Marvel movie? Oh, that's right. Cate Blanchett in Thor Ragnarok as Hela. Great actresses. Great performances for the most part. Hamming it up really in the right ways for the most part. At the end of the day, terrible villains. There is a question about Agatha Harkness, so I won't go too far in depth with my thoughts. But look, again, we had all these expectations about Agatha, and we all knew that it was probably going to be Agatha. By the way, Agatha All Along has been stuck in my head all week. That song is insanely catchy, but think about it. It really wasn't Agatha All Along. This character, again, I think that Marvel has fixed their villain problem for the most part, which is good. I'm a little worried they're reverting back here, and this is just one show out of the 20 billion things that they have coming up. Zemo, I think, is going to be much better, obviously because he's already been around, so I think that's good. I really hope, because I again love the character development they gave to Wanda and Vision. And if you had to sacrifice screen time for Agatha Harkness for them, okay, fine. But that's a sacrifice that we made in Phase 1 and Phase 2. Look, Ironmonger wasn't great, but he was in service of Tony, as a character. Okay, fine. But now we know we can have our cake and eat it too. Black Panther is a perfect example. You can have a brilliant protagonist and great character development. And I get it, Black Panther is one of the top films in the MCU, at least for me, and to many. But you can also have a great villain as well. It's, you can have both. So I hope that this isn't a trend that keeps going on in the MCU, because you can't bat 1,000, right? Even the fact that Marvel is batting somewhere like 500 with their villains to me is great. But they can do better. They can do better. So before I get to your guys' questions, though, those are basically my thoughts on the show as a whole. But let's talk about post-credit scenes and where I think that this is going to set up future films. We have a question about this as well. A lot of points that I want to talk about here are going to be addressed later in the questions, so I will save some of those for later. But let's talk about the post-credit scenes. So the first one, and again, just to preface this, I want to say that I was expecting maybe a tease for Spider-Man or a tease for Doctor Strange. I'm not necessarily disappointed, but I think that these post-credit scenes could have been something more than what they were. They were a little on the bland side to me, I think. Look, we kind of assumed that Monica was going to space. Did we need a post-credit scene? I think that could have been tagged on at the end of the show itself. That's okay. Monica going to see Nick Fury makes sense. Captain Marvel 2, it makes sense, right? I'm sure Nick Fury is going to be in Captain Marvel 2. Great, fine. And then the last scene, Incredible Hulk-esque, where Wanda's hiding out. Look, it's interesting. The Darkhold, maybe evil, maybe not. Again, I feel like that's all sort of stuff that could be set up in Doctor Strange 2 itself. She's trying to get back her kids. I feel like they could have teased other things that might have been a little bit more exciting. Maybe even had a scene from Falcon and the Soldier, or a scene from Spider-Man No Way Home, which makes more sense. I digress. At the end of the day, post-credit scenes don't make or break a show, obviously. Because look, just to wrap up my thoughts, I loved WandaVision. I did. It's not in the top 5. I'll just be straight up right now. It's not in my top 5 ranking, but it is squarely in the top 10. And that's because it took a risk. And I think that risk paid off. And I think for the most part, the risks they took were bold, but they paid off in big ways. Wanda and Vision, Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany, work on so many different levels that it's just impossible to not give the show credit where it's due. You can talk about Ralph, you can talk about Pietro, you can talk about Agatha Harkness, you can talk about Monica Rambeau, the twins, the lack of mutants, White Vision, where did he go? You can talk about all of that. Great. At the end of the day, this show promised us one thing and one thing alone. Oh, a show about Wanda and Vision. And it delivered. It delivered in spades. Again, the ending of episode 9, the entirety of episode 8. It's just beautiful. Something that the MCU just hasn't done. And so I can overlook a lot of my misgivings about the other things, little nitpicks that I have about WandaVision. The finale, again, didn't blow me away. And that's okay. You know, we all expect the finale to be the best episode. And in most cases it is. You know, Mandalorian season 1, I think for me was my favorite episode. Mandalorian season 2, the finale was close to my favorite episode. But it just didn't work out that way this time. And that's fine. That's okay. Because plenty of movies, for example, have maybe not the best last 30 minutes, but the rest of it was phenomenal. And we still love the movie. At least I would. And so I loved WandaVision. And I love talking about it with you guys and making my videos. And speaking of talking with you guys, let's finally get into your questions. So I am going to take the remainder of the time for me to answer your guys' questions that you sent in via email, via comments on YouTube. And again, for the future, if you guys want to send in questions, so here's how the rest of it's going to go is I'm going to take your guys' questions and talk about what you guys thought about the show. And then I'm going to do an episode by episode ranking, and then we're going to close out here. So again, if you want to send in questions in the future, whenever I have a new episode of the podcast, you can email me, accessblockbusters@gmail.com, send a DM in Instagram, accessblockbusters, @accessblockbusters, or just comment on a Marvel Mania video. I read through all the comments. I'm trying my best to reply to all of them. And I really do try to, support you guys and help you guys out and be there for the community as much as possible. So just post a comment in any video, honestly, as long as it's clear that what the comment is for. And I will, I'll take the question into consideration. So let's get started. So, before we get into the WandaVision questions, and this is actually sort of related to WandaVision, so I wanted to address this now. I promised Superwise, big supporter of the channel. Thank you so much. Great guy, great content. In last episode of Marvel Mania, I asked for questions, and he posted a comment. I didn't end up posting an episode of the podcast after that for a while. This is the next episode. But I did promise that I would answer the question. And that episode was talking about Spider-Verse and about the Disney investors meeting, shareholders call. And I think that this question is sort of relevant in just, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange. So his question from then, and he does have some great questions for later as well, but his question from back then, a couple months ago, do you think the rumored but likely returns of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in Spider-Man 3/Doctor Strange 2 could eventually lead to the continuation of solo movies in Tobey and Andrew's universes? Spider-Man 4, The Amazing Spider-Man 3. It's a really interesting question. And again, first of all, unrelated to your question, I just kind of want to go off on a side tangent because we've been talking about expectations for a while. If Tobey and Andrew don't show up in Spider-Man 3, Spider-Man No Way Home, I think that's totally fine. I think we have to kind of be prepared for the fact that maybe they're not going to show up. I still think they will, but if they don't, that's totally fine. It is what it is. It's fine. They don't have to show up to make the movie good. Spider-Man 1 and 2 in the MCU didn't have Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and I adore those films. So there's that. So, but to answer your question about, in my eyes, will there be a Spider-Man 4 or an Amazing Spider-Man 3? I think the answer is no. However, I don't think if Spider-Man No Way Home does open up the multiverse, and what I was talking, I think in another video in the comments with Superwise about this, is I wouldn't be surprised either because we were both agreeing that I think that Spider-Man is going to head back to Sony at some point. I think the Venomverse or the Spider-Verse or whatever is going on over there is going to be successful enough. I think Morbius looks good. I think Venom is fun. Venom 2 looks fun. Whatever else they got going on there, Kraven. They have Michael Keaton. They have Jake Gyllenhaal, obviously because they're their characters, even though they were in the MCU. And if Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield show up in Spider-Man No Way Home, obviously I don't think they're going to just be there to die. I don't think so. So I think there is a distinct possibility that they will show up again. Not in the MCU necessarily, maybe, but in the Sony Spider-Verse. I think that I would put a lot more merit into that idea than just a straight Spider-Man 4 directed by Sam Raimi. And I would put more merit into a Spider-Man 4, by the way, than an Amazing Spider-Man 3, because Amazing Spider-Man 2 was, not successful at all. And at least, Spider-Man 3 was okay, by a lot of people's standards, and Sam Raimi is back in the MCU, in Marvel. I would put more merit into the idea that they're going to show up in those films rather than have their own continuations of their storylines. But, again, anything is possible. Anything is possible. Alright, so, there was that question. Thank you so much for that question, Superwise. Let's move on to the WandaVision questions. There are some questions that we got here, and these are going to be questions that you guys put in about WandaVision, and also just some of your thoughts about the show as well. So, got an email from Just a Marvel Fan. Thank you so much for writing in. Who asks a question that I think I was surprised just how many people wanted to know this in my life, not in the comments necessarily, but just in my life, that I brushed aside almost immediately. His question is, or his or her question, their question is, where is the beekeeper now, and what exactly happened to him? That, you would be shocked, maybe not, maybe I would be shocked, I am shocked at how many people wanted to know the answer to this question. Because I'm going to be 1,000% transparent with you, with all of you. I couldn't have cared less where the beekeeper went. I just assumed he died. I just assumed he was a part of the Westview, whatever. But a lot of you guys seem to care about this, and that's really interesting. Let me know why in the comments down below, or just send me a message or whatever it is. To answer the question, frankly, obviously I don't know. If I had to guess, I would think I don't think he died. I think he just got turned into part of the universe somehow when she warped back time or did something or the other. 'Cause, I mean, I don't really see any explanation. And again, I don't know if there's much relevance to where the beekeeper is. And again, maybe that's just me. I totally could just be me. But it's really interesting that you guys really want to know about this. And yeah, I mean, I would, if I had to put 2 cents down, I would think that he just became part of the Hex. So thank you so much for answering those, for asking that question. I'm going to move over to the comment section now and take, those questions and comments right now. So, let's start out with Orange Entertainment, who writes, I loved WandaVision. Perfect refresher for the MCU. And I couldn't agree with that more. I think that definitely, we could have started out with Black Widow, and I think Black Widow would have been fun, and I can't wait for Black Widow, obviously. But I also think there's something so poetic and just the beginning of the television era of Marvel starts out with such a beautiful piece of content. And again, Phase 4 starts out with just such a beautifully written and wonderful refresher. It's something new, something creative, and I could not agree with that anymore. Okay. The next one's up, we got Superwise again. So for this episode of the podcast, I keep on saying Marvel Mania. It's not Marvel Mania. Well, it could be. Anyways, you guys don't want to care. You guys don't care about that. But he asks 3 questions, and because I didn't get 3,000 questions, I will be answering all the questions. So thank you guys all for sending them in. So number 1, the hashtag Quicksilver, Save Quicksilver hashtag movement is currently popular. At the time, when the question video was posted, it was trending. Currently popular because fans are not happy with how Marvel Studios treated Evan Peters' fake Pietro. Do you think, due to the overwhelming backlash, that it's possible in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness for Evan Peters to return as the same exact Fox X-Men Quicksilver to please those fans? Personally, I'm not happy that Evan Peters was just used as a juvenile joke, and would definitely like to see him back as the real Fox version. Your thoughts? Great question. Here, I think there is a definitive answer for that. There are definitely layers to your question that I think have a lot of nuances. On the surface level, do I think he's going to come up and be retconned in Doctor Strange 2? No. I don't. And here's why. And I alluded to this before. It's a great question because I think, a lot of people are upset about Ralph and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not happy with it either. But Kevin Feige is not reactionary at all. Like I've alluded to before in the podcast, the changes that Kevin Feige has made in his plans, we got, the Spider-Man films, the Inhumans, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, have been for very, very, very specific reasons. He does not change course. His entire Phase 3 lineup, except for the Inhumans, of course, and obviously Infinity War Part 2, but that was more of a creative thing, and adding the 2 Spider-Man films, did not budge. I mean, again, I don't want to get into DC versus Marvel, but just as an example, you look over at DC, Cyborg film, Flash film, what is it, New Gods film, Plastic Man film, I don't even know what's going on over there anymore. Shazam 2 is coming out, Aquaman 2 is coming out. It seems like and again, I love a lot of DC films, so I'm not hating on DC at all, but the executives at Warner Brothers seem to just not have a direction for their content. They're very much reactionary. They loved Shazam. We're going to make Shazam 2. Okay, great. They loved Aquaman. We're going to make Aquaman 2. Okay, great. But there doesn't seem to be a clear direction. Kevin Feige doesn't budge from plan. He had a plan. Well, I don't, when he cast Evan Peters, it remains to be seen. But there was a plan there. And look, eventually, so here's the layered part of that question. Eventually, could he be retconned back into Quicksilver? Absolutely, he could. But the keyword is eventually. And I want to point you guys to Iron Man 3 as the prime example. Fans were not happy, in general. Obviously, some were. Some liked it. Not happy with Trevor Slattery and the Mandarin. Me being one of them. Although, again, just like with the Quicksilver situation, I'm not up in arms about Trevor Slattery. It is what it is. Kevin Feige did not make the Mandarin the villain of Avengers Age of Ultron. Avengers Age of the Mandarin or whatever. He did not, the next movie that Tony was in, he did not just put the real Mandarin in there because fans were not happy. Fans, to this day are still not exactly happy, but Kevin Feige was like, okay, we didn't necessarily please all the fans, that's fine. And guess what? The real Mandarin is coming. For those of for those of you who are big fans of the Mandarins in the comics, in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, he is coming. So it's not to say that Feige will not eventually maybe bring back Evan Peters as the Fox X-Men Quicksilver. To be honest with you, there is even a chance, I think, that they might have a tiny cameo just to kind of poke fun at the idea that, oh, hey, he also is the same. Like, there is an alternate universe where he actually is Quicksilver, and it's the Fox universe. Maybe. But to say that he would be brought back as quickly as Doctor Strange 2, I just don't think Feige deviates from plan that much. So there is that. But that's an excellent question. Thank you so much. The second question from Superwise. I didn't really like Agatha Harkness as the villain. In my opinion, her character development was like non-existent. The reveal was ruined for me, and the character just didn't go anywhere. She was pretty generic. Kathryn Hahn gives a really good performance. It's just that the character was not written well. For me, Agatha is going to be put in the tier a little bit above the forgettable MCU villain. Not awful like Malekith or Ronan, just not that good. Your thoughts on Agatha overall? And yeah, I've touched on this before. In this episode of the podcast, but I could not agree with that more. I always tell people, great performance does not equal great character. I think Red Skull, this might be controversial, I think Red Skull is a great performance by Hugo Weaving. I think he's not a good villain because he's a Nazi. And I get it, World War II. I understand the context. But, I mean, it's crazy that awful people like that existed in our real world. They're just beyond our comprehension of how they could do such a thing. But in terms of storytelling, Nazis are not sympathetic. They're, he's a crazy guy with a red face, I agree. Kathryn Hahn gave a great performance most of the time. But her characterization, I couldn't agree with you more, is it's just not, it just wasn't there. And I'm sure that was intentional. I'm sure they wanted to really focus on Wanda and Vision. And I get that. I do. Like I said, I just hope that this doesn't become the norm again, because that would be a little disappointing. So there's that. And then the third question from Superwise. Kevin Feige has already stated that there are currently no plans for a WandaVision Season 2, but do you think that due to the mostly positive fan response that a Season 2 could happen? Where would it go and what would it focus on? Because you can't just do the same sitcom premise over again. Absolutely agree with that. If there is going to be a WandaVision Season 2, you just can't do this again. This is lightning in a bottle, and it was awesome. Please don't do it again. Please don't do it again. Could there be a Season 2? I will say, so to your question of, the part of your question of due to the mostly positive fan response, it's possible, like, obviously Feige also listens to the fans, and obviously the reason we're getting a Thor Love and Thunder is because of the positive fan reaction to Thor Ragnarok, but obviously that was planned a long time ago. You guys gotta think about Feige's plan in, 5 years, at the least. So, if there was going to be a WandaVision Season 2, and let's just say it comes out in 2 or 3 years, that means that it was planned even before WandaVision Season 1 came out. And it's possible. It's even more possible with White Vision, because now that he's here, if White Vision hadn't been in the show, I would have said almost 0% chance. Now that you have Wanda and you have Vision, it's possible. I could see a Season 2 called the Vision and the Scarlet Witch, like in the comics. Somebody was telling me that, with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they could see Season 2 and 3 where they just kind of change up the name slightly. Like, you have, Falcon and Winter Soldier, you have maybe Sam and Bucky, you have all that sort of stuff, and it sort of ends its run as the Captain America and the Winter Soldier, like a play on Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Maybe. It's possible. I could see the Vision and the Scarlet Witch. Here, I just think, I think that there are more interesting things now to do, and not to say that they couldn't do it. I was so against a Toy Story 4, for example, because I was like, why are you going back to this? And they made a brilliant film. I would probably have a very similar reaction to a WandaVision Season 2 being announced. Like, why are we going back here? It was so good the last time, just don't. And they could make it brilliant. I have no doubt. At this moment, do I think there is going to be a Season 2? I'm going to say no, and I'm going to put it at less than 10%, I'm going to say 7% chance. I just don't see how they do it again. And again, to your question of what direction would they go, if they went a certain direction, it would probably be something about White Vision and the Scarlet Witch, the Vision and the Scarlet Witch. I'm just, I think lightning in a bottle, right? I think that this really was lightning in a bottle, and I'm not sure you can recapture that. But who am I to say, anything is possible. So thank you so much, Superwise, for your 3 questions. I really do appreciate your support for the channel. Thank you so much. All right, let's move on before this episode gets to be 6 hours long. The next question is from AwesomeSwag80, and he sends in a few questions as well as his own review, which I will read out absolutely. But he sends in some questions, and so we will be answering those as well. Question number 1 from AwesomeSwag80. How would you bring back Quicksilver in a better way than they have done? So a slight variation on Supervisor's question. How would I bring back Quicksilver in a better way if I were Kevin Feige? The answer to that is I wouldn't have, I think. I don't think, if I were Kevin Feige, in that situation, I would have just cast Aaron Taylor Johnson. I don't know, by the way, I don't know why Aaron Taylor Johnson wasn't in WandaVision at all. Was he busy? Because it felt like even in the Hydra flashback scene, it felt like he should have been in there at least a little bit. I digress. Whatever. If I had to do this all over again, if I were Kevin Feige, I would have just gotten Aaron Taylor Johnson to be the fake Pietro, because I feel like that has the potential to be more emotionally devastating when she realizes this guy is a little weird. He's my brother, but he's kind of weird, and he also is American, and what happened to your accent, I feel like that would have been how I would have done it. If I were to actually, if you're asking me how I would have brought back Quicksilver, actually, I think the answer is I wouldn't have. And I think that just characters need to stay dead in the MCU. Look, if you're going to bring back Vision 20 times, you're going to bring back Loki 20 times. If you're going to eventually bring back Captain America and Iron Man, which they probably will, I feel like some characters just need to stay dead. I really respect James Gunn keeping Yondu dead. He's said over and over and over again, Yondu is dead. I think Quicksilver dying is one of, not to be morbid, just in terms of narrative storytelling, that he really was a big part of Wanda's development. And I would just keep him dead. Honestly, I would just keep him dead. But that's a good question, though. Okay, the second question that Awesome Swag asked is, I love the sitcom style and everything, but I wish they played at least some, he says Ryle, I'm not entirely sure what that means, I'm sorry, but in the finale episode, I feel like they disregarded that whole thing in the last 3 episodes. And again, if I'm misconstruing your question, I apologize. Please let me know. I'm going to take it as you mean you love the sitcom style and you wish that they had talked about it and done it a little bit more in the last 3 episodes. Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I am of two minds of it. I love the sitcom style as well. I loved it. At the same time, I felt like it had taken its course by the time we got to the last 3 episodes. I feel like, and I think that it, it's hard to say because the ending of WandaVision is sort of a generic-y Marvel ending, a little bit, yeah. And it gets away from the creativity of the show a little bit, but also, I just feel like how much further could you have dragged out the sitcoms is my question. Because I love them. But what is too much of a good thing? Is sort of my thought on that question. But, I agree. I did love the sitcoms as well. The third question that Awesome Swag asked is, we have a pretty clear picture of how this would work with Doctor Strange 2, but what about Spider-Man 3? Excellent question. I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue because I think we all expected this to line up with Spider-Man 3 in some way. It really didn't. And I think that surprised a lot of us. Here is just my sort of basic theory as of right now. Because we know that Spider-Man Far From Home takes place in the summer of 2024. So about, 8 months after WandaVision? And presumably Spider-Man No Way Home takes place between summer and Christmas because we saw some set photos of Christmas time. So almost a year after WandaVision. My guess is, and by the way, I get it, Doctor Strange didn't need to show up, but also, narratively, you would have thought that he would have noticed something like Westview happening. Maybe that's just a nitpick, whatever. But my working theory is that maybe Wanda's hex sort of creates ripple effects. Like, she didn't open the multiverse herself, but Catherine Hahn warns her, you're more dangerous than you think. Maybe she opens up ripples in the multiverse, and that sort of plays into Spider-Man Far From Home and No Way Home, to where maybe it starts in Queens, and Doctor Strange goes to investigate that. Again, why didn't he investigate Westview? I don't know. Busy? On vacation? I don't know. But maybe he goes to investigate that in Spider-Man 3, and then he sort of, so he works that all out with Peter, and then he's like, oh, this is all related to Wanda. And then, Wanda's going after her kids. I gotta stop Wanda, or whatever the case may be. That's my guess. But again, it's interesting they didn't do a lot of setup for Spider-Man No Way Home, which probably means Spider-Man No Way Home doesn't need a lot of setup. I think Elizabeth Olsen in an interview said, oh, I would assume I'm in Spider-Man No Way Home. I doubt it, honestly. I don't see any place for Wanda other than a credit scene or at the very end to be in Spider-Man No Way Home. But, again, I've been surprised before, so we'll have to see. And number 4 is Awesome Swag's review of WandaVision. So, I absolutely love, he says, he or she, they said, sorry. I absolutely love how they executed this creative and new Marvel property. Even the ending of the season is great. I see a lot of people saying it's bad, but I felt it was really exciting and sad. And as you said before, it really explores emotion without undermining it with Marvel humor the very next second. I always was okay with Wanda and Vision, but this show brought a whole new light to them and their respective actors. Just amazing work. This is a great step forward for Marvel and for Phase 4. I don't think we're getting a superhero. Let me do that again. I don't think we're getting superhero burnout in media anytime soon after watching WandaVision. Now I'm super excited for Falcon and the Winter Soldier in about a week. And he says, love your stuff. Really appreciate that, man. Yeah. So I just echo a lot of those points. I think that, and I think it's an interesting point about superhero burnout. I think as long as these shows and movies are different from each other. If we got Falcon and the Winter Soldier, how many shows are we getting this year? 6, right? If we got 6 Falcon and the Winter Soldiers, you can talk about superhero burnout. But we got a WandaVision. We got a Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We got a Loki. We got a She-Hulk, which is going to be a comedy. We got a Hawkeye. Miss Marvel. What If? You know? They're all so different from one another. And I completely agree. Just amazing, amazing work from these actors. Just to elevate these characters on that level. I couldn't agree more. All right. The next thought is from, and again, I apologize if I mispronounce names, but Andres Quinones. He said, I thought WandaVision was good. The only thing I didn't like was that Agatha brought back Quicksilver. It seems to be a common theme. And I agree with that, you know. I had other little nitpicks about the show, but I generally agree. I think that it wasn't the best idea on Feige's part to cast Evan Peters. I don't think that bringing Quicksilver back in itself was the wrong idea. I just think that Evan Peters, I don't know if they underestimated the reaction, but that, you know, whatever. We'll get past it. Jimmy Talks Movie says, I love this TV show. Absolutely, I do as well. That nerdbot Diaz says that, I'm sorry that, he basically says I won't be able to watch the podcast because he hasn't seen WandaVision yet, but he still puts in a question and asks, because of how WandaVision will affect Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, do you think the MCU will ever have definitive endings? Like that it, he writes, like that's it, folks. Sorry, no more MCU. Interesting question. Good question. Here's something interesting that I've been thinking about for the MCU. Is that while they may not have a definitive ending, I actually do feel like they are, in a sense, soft rebooting the MCU already. And it's not even that subtle. You think about the 6 key Avengers, the big 6. They all have a replacement, a very, very key replacement already being set up in the MCU. It's almost like they're being soft rebooted already. In the same universe, obviously, with the repercussions of the Infinity Saga. But, you know, they are already having replacements. Iron Man has Ironheart and Spider-Man. So there's 2. Captain America has Bucky and Sam, or US Agent, or whoever that's, Isaiah Bradley, whoever that's going to be. So there's that. Thor has Lady Thor, literally Lady Thor. Hulk has She-Hulk, literally She-Hulk. Who else? Hawkeye has Kate Bishop, and Black Widow has Yelena Belova. Like, they have 1-to-1 equivalents for who's going to replace them. So, while I think, to answer your question, I don't think that Marvel is going to just stop one day unless they're just failing, which is many, many years away, if ever. But I think that Endgame is about as definitive of an ending as they can go, because then I think after that they're just going to soft reboot and do it again. With different characters, different stories, different tales, different arcs, all that sort of stuff, different villains. Definitive ending? No. But almost like a soft reboot, I think that that's definitely in the cards. So that's a good question. Dynamite772, the commentator, says, I have a question for the podcast. Is Disney Plus worth it just for Marvel and Star Wars content? And this is the last question that's been sent in. So thank you guys again so much for your questions and comments. I've had a great time going through them all. And again, for the next episode, whenever it's going to come out, definitely we'll be doing this again. So, do I think that Marvel. Do I think that Disney Plus alone is worth it just for Marvel and Star Wars? This might be a cop-out answer. It probably is a cop-out answer. In general, I'm going to have to say it just depends, right? But it obviously depends on who you're, because I think that we also, you know, as the nerd collective, I guess, I think we often forget about Disney Plus as well for the kids, the demographic of the kids. Because a lot of people, parents, the millions of people who got Disney Plus, got it for the kids. You see how much premium kid content there is. Disney Channel, Mickey Mouse, the animated princess movies, the animated, like The Lion King and all that sort of stuff. There's so much content for the kids. Now, if you're asking for us, I think, again, that just depends on how into it you are. will Marvel and Star Wars draw in more subscribers because of the way that they're being? Absolutely. I know already so many people who got Disney Plus just for The Mandalorian, just for WandaVision. Absolutely. Is it worth it? Is a question that I think you would have to answer for yourself. I mean, obviously for me it's worth it. But is it worth it to many others? I would say if Marvel and Star Wars, as it seems, because Bad Batch is coming out on May the 4th be with you, that's going to take the place of May, and then Loki's in June, Shang-Chi, and then What If, and Hawkeye, and all that sort of stuff. Is it worth it just for that? And then obviously Book of Boba Fett in December. As long as this content keeps coming every single week, and there isn't really a break, then yeah, I think absolutely. That's what Netflix has done so well, is they've been able to put out premium content almost every week, and that's why people love it. If Disney Plus can do it, then, I obviously want to say I can't speak for everyone, but I think, yeah, absolutely, it's worth it. That is just my take on that. So again, thank you guys so much for the questions. Really do appreciate it. Looking forward to doing this again. To wrap up this episode, it's already going on a little bit longer, but that's okay. I've had a good time talking about WandaVision, but I will be doing my episode by episode rankings of the show. Again, what I want to say before I get into this is that, these things can change, right? Like my, my perspective on these episodes can definitely change. This is just in this present moment. What did I think about every single episode? And where do I think it ranks up, or it ranks in general? So let's start out with number 9, and we're going to head up to number 1. And actually, I'm looking at my list. I'm going to make a quick change right now because I think I just changed my mind right now. So there you go. It's always changing. But we're going to go from 9 to 1, and we're going to rank the episodes again, just my opinion, from worst to best. And again, I like all the episodes. So, worst can mean a lot of different things. But in number 9, coming in at number 9, I have episode 3, Now in Color. There's nothing particularly wrong with this episode in my eyes. Again, I think the best parts were sort of when Wanda snaps and kicks Monica out and all that sort of stuff. Cool. The whole pregnancy thing was just cute. It was fun. You get hints of, Geraldine, who is Geraldine, and Herb, and being all weird, and the pregnancy stuff. It was okay. It was fine. That's all I really got to say about that. Coming in at number 8 is episode 7, Breaking the Fourth Wall. Now, this disappointed me, not because I didn't like the episode, but because you guys know I'm a huge Office fan. I make videos about Marvel and Star Wars, and then I make an Office video, and you guys might think that's weird, but I love The Office, so, that is what it is. And this was going to be the episode that they were spoofing The Office. And obviously Modern Family as well. That part of it was fun. The rest of the episode was okay, I think. It just felt a little hollow and empty to me. And again, I was a little disappointed by that. Perhaps my expectations and all that sort of stuff, Vision and funnel cakes and getting stuck in traffic, maybe, but it is what it is. I don't dislike the episode. I wished it could have been my favorite sitcom. As it turns out, by the way, my favorite sitcom episode is a decade that I don't really relate to at all. So, speaks to the creativity and the execution of this show. But there it is, episode 7 at number 8. At number 7, I have episode 6, All New Halloween Spooktacular, which also disappointed me a little bit because in the trailers, I thought the Halloween episode was going to be my favorite. I didn't have any real rationale behind that. I just sort of thought, oh yeah, this is going to be my favorite episode. It turns out it was fine. It was cute. It was fun. It's about it. I mean, at the end, obviously, Wanda breaks open the hex and extends it further and all that sort of stuff. It was okay. Cute. Fine. Yeah. Whatever. Coming in at number 6 is episode 2, Don't Turn That Dial. Here's the thing about this episode. It's not too pivotal to the story. This almost feels like the most one-off episode out of the whole series because you don't really get any sense of something's going wrong. It's just cute. It's fun. But it is really fun. It's really, really funny. Listen, when I was watching this show for the first time and we got to episodes 1 and 2, I was just blown away by how good Paul Bettany was. I knew he was a good actor, obviously, but man, episode 2 really just did it. He's so funny. He's absolutely hilarious. So I really like episode 2. Coming in at number 5 is episode 9, the series finale. We've talked about this. Again, it wasn't my favorite. It's right smack in the middle for me because, it was good. It was a CGI fight at the end. The White Vision versus Vision and talking at the end. Great. Love that. Rest of it, I think the emotion of the ending was great. Other than that, was just Marvel being Marvel. So right in the middle. Coming in at number 4 is episode 1, filmed in front of a live studio audience. I surprisingly really like this episode. Actually, I don't have any attachment to the 50s as a decade. I didn't grow up in the 50s, but I really like this episode. It just had this charm about it that I think is just so fun and appealing. And I don't know. It's just something charming and charismatic about the first episode that I loved. I did really like. I understand the appeal of a show like the Dick Van Dyke Show now. So that's good. Coming in at number 3 is and the highest sitcom episode because, spoiler alert, episodes 4 and 8 in whatever order are 1 and 2. But is episode 5 on a very special episode. I don't necessarily think that the sitcom parts of this episode were my favorite though. I think that episode 1 for me had the best sitcom parts of it, but I think that episode 5 has some of my favorite scenes in the entire series. I think that the scene where Wanda breaks out of Westview and confronts Hayward was awesome. That is one of my favorite Wanda scenes ever. Crazy good. I think the ending, not the ending with Pietro, but the ending argument scene with Vision was incredibly well done. The emotion they were able to get at these characters, so well done. That I think that this episode is just up there. Now, coming in at coming in at number 2 is episode 4, We Interrupt This Program. This was my favorite episode until, obviously, spoiler alert, episode 8, but it blew back the curtains and gave us a ton of answers, but also just laid out questions. And I love that about the show, that it knew exactly where its audience was and just gave the information that it needed. And that was awesome. And also Jimmy, Monica, and Darcy, great. But of course, coming in at my favorite episode 8, previously on, what this episode did was painted Wanda Maximoff in the emotional light that set her up for that ending in episode 9. This episode gave Wanda Maximoff 20 times more character development than any other MCU anything ever did for her. And I just can't commend the show enough for it. It was fantastic. Being able to, obviously the scene where she and Vision are talking at the Avengers compound is one of my favorites of all time. Now, it's so good, so well written. And just in general, seeing how she got to where she was, it's just beautiful. That's all I can say about that episode. It's beautiful. It is one of my favorite just Marvel anythings ever. And of course, brought a tear to my eye, brought many tears to my eyes. It was just great. And yeah, so going from, again, I'll go from 9 to 1. Is you got episode 3, episode 7, episode 6, episode 2, episode 9, episode 1, episode 5, episode 4, and episode 8. That is my ranking as of right now. I am planning on eventually getting around to watching WandaVision from beginning to end, of course, but as of right now, that is the ranking. And that is, I believe that is about all I had planned for today's episode of the podcast. We are running at about an hour and 20 minutes. It is crazy long. If you have stuck around and listened to the whole thing, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you could have just put it on in the background and relaxed and done something else. I really had a good time talking about it with you guys. And I think that, look, at the end of the day, this was a show that I was telling people to expect great things, but not many people were, I think. They were expecting just a fun, quirky show. And we got WandaVision. And I think that it's a really good sign for what's to come for Marvel. So that is about going to do it for this episode of Access Blockbusters Pod. I'm going to call it tentatively. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to check it out on Spotify, if that's where you are listening, that's awesome. I think I need 3 episodes to get it on Apple Podcasts, so we're working on that. I'm sure this episode, I'm hoping this episode will get it over there, hopefully. But if you did enjoy, this will be on YouTube as well. Leave a comment. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if you enjoyed the WandaVision series as a whole. Any other comments and questions and concerns you have about WandaVision. And when the next episode comes out and when I know what it's going to be about, I will definitely put a video out. I don't have the community feature, unfortunately. You need 1,000 subscribers, I think. So I can't put out polls or asking for questions, but I will put out another video asking for questions then. So stay tuned. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great, when is this coming out? I think on Tuesday. So have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you next time on the channel.